Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jake Rader, and I'm co-chairing this session today with Dr. Julius Corley. I'll start with a few words of introduction, and then Julius will welcome each of our panelists for their individual remarks, and then finally, he will lead a panel discussion. Today's topic is equity, diversity, and inclusion in medical entrepreneurship. While much has been said about each of these topics individually, very little has been said about how they relate to each other. And so today we have assembled a stellar panel who will provide their own perspectives from government, from startup companies, from academia, and from one of the largest companies in the world. Together, these perspectives will paint a picture of not only what should be done, but what is actually being done, and where we as an industry and as a nation are heading. My introductory remarks are intended to provide some shared context and are organized into three levels: a macro level at the national level, a meso level, thinking about individual organizations, and then at the micro level, and ultimately this is all personal. And so I'm going to move in and get my slides going here and get started with the introduction. So at a national level, there's some demographics on the left panel of this slide. First thing you'll notice is that if we're talking about majorities and minorities, males are actually a minority in the United States, of 50.5% female in this country. Then if you divide up the males along the bottom here, there's a large fraction that is non-white. There's a smaller fractions that are disabled or living in poverty. And then you've got maybe a quarter of the population that is the white, wealthy, able-bodied so-called majority, which is, of course, an oxymoron at this point. And the problem from a national level, one of the many problems, even if you don't have a moral compass, is that if our society and our structures are set up to support 1/4 of our population, we are not going to be as competitive, and our society will not grow and progress as well as it would if we supported everyone equally. So does that matter? Should we do a little scaling here? How about we look at the females? That's 167 million people. That is twice the population of Germany, and twice Germany's GDP is almost $10 trillion. If we can do this with the other groups on this page, and hopefully that convinces you that a 10% improvement in how these structurally disadvantaged groups are treated and supported could result in trillions of dollars in advantage. This is also a competitive world. And if the United States is not running on all cylinders, we will not compete as well as we otherwise could. That's a view from the national scale. The meso scale, there's an awful lot, very few companies these days are not talking about EDI, but the question is, why? You know, is it really out of the goodness of their hearts? And if it turned out that focusing on EDI had a negative impact on business performance, it would be a controversial issue, but it does not. It is very well understood that focus on EDI and not just talking about it, but actually improving it leads to improved business outcomes. And so in this particular case, published in the Harvard Business Review, diversity, which is the easiest of ED&I to measure, increases in diversity led to increases in innovation as well as performance. And it's not just one article. There was a seminal study done by McKinsey & Company, the world's leading consultancy, that looked at this in great detail across many hundreds of organizations. And the likelihood of financial performance being higher than the median is significantly better in those companies that are more diverse ethnically and at a gender level. And why is that? Why would that be true? Well, if you're the CEO of an organization, what are some of the things you think about? One of the things is to make sure that you've got the best team around you. And so that's winning the war for talent. Another thing you always think about is your customer. Who are you serving? How well are you connected to your customers? And that customer orientation is measurably improved as well. Employee satisfaction leads to lower turnover. Turnover is incredibly expensive. And in my business, relatively small business that I run, decision-making, getting perspectives from around a table that is not all saying yes, 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 they're saying, I see it differently, results in measurably better decisions, more innovation as well. And of course, there's a brand value. And so all of this sounds revolutionary, but you know what? It's not. Okay, these studies are old. This is not the cutting edge. The Harvard study was from 2015, the McKinsey study from 2015. And the title of this session was purposefully titled to say, we don't have to think outside the box to do EDI well. The box is gone. Okay, the box was gone at least a decade ago. Leading companies have been doing this for decades, and they've been benefiting from the performance advantages. And so there is no box. And then the question is, what should we as individuals do with that information? So one of the things that not everybody thinks about on a daily basis, but companies do not make decisions. Human beings within companies make decisions. Okay? It's a fine distinction, but it's a really, really important one. And the reason it's important is that it implies that if we as a nation are going to get better at EDI, then we as individuals and within our organizations have to get better at EDI. And so I'll describe now, this is a personal issue. This is about you, and this is about me. And I'll describe my own view of this, which changed radically on May 25th of 2020. Previous to that date, I was fairly self-satisfied that I treated people equitably, that I had a diverse organization, and that I was personally very inclusive. Everything was fine with me. That's a very passive way to view the world. There are worse ways to view the world, but there are also much better ways to view the world. On May 25th, the discussion got turned up to 11, and I think we all had a bit of reckoning. My own personal response to that was that being self-satisfied and passive is no longer acceptable. I happened to win a lottery and be one of those healthy and relatively wealthy and well-supported white males. And that gave me advantages that I never even recognized. And so what is my responsibility to my organizations, to my fellow countrymen, and to my country to take action for the future? And this is the difference between being not racist and being anti-racist. And there's a lot of other ways in which people describe this. But that change, to me, in my life at least, is one of the most powerful things that I've seen in my professional career. And so this is really about being better, doing better at each of those levels. And let's acknowledge the fact that not everybody is going to go on this journey. Not everybody will grow and improve. As I said, the leading organizations have been doing this for decades. Many individual humans have been out there fighting hard, spending real time and energy for decades. But now this is really a movement. And a year or two from now, we're going to look back at today and say, that's the time when we could have still got on the train. But make no mistake, the train is moving, and it's going to be very difficult to catch up if you're not participating now. And so today's discussion is going to be how some of the leading organizations, whether they're at the startup level, the university level, at the government, or at the large company level, are leading these changes. So we'll hear from Johnson & Johnson and Michal Preminger. We'll hear from CoreMap and Sarah Kalil, who leads that organization. We'll hear from Asim, who's here from NIH, and Mark is here from NYU as well. And each one of these panelists is going to provide their own perspective on this topic. And those perspectives together will provide, I think, an awful lot of value to the audience. When they're finished making their individual comments, Julius is going to lead a panel discussion, and the panelists will be able to answer your questions as well. And so I'm very much looking forward to this discussion. Julius, why don't you take us into the next part of it?
Great, thanks, Jake, and thanks for those introductory comments. So first up will be Michal Preminger, J&J Driven Accelerator External Advisory Committee. Michal is the head of the Johnson & Johnson's Innovation Center in Boston. In this role, she leads the Innovation Center team to build, advance, and manage the external R&D portfolio spanning pharmaceuticals, consumer health, and medical devices. Previously, Michal was the Executive Director of Technology Development at Harvard Medical School, held a number of business development and technology development positions at Compugen, co-founded a biotech company, and has served and continues to serve in a number of board director and SAB roles. She earned a PhD from the Weizmann Institute and an MBA from INSEAD. And with that, Michal was not able to be here with us, but did send a recording. And so now Laura from Metrotech, can you cue up that recording, please?
Sorry about that. Let me try again on another screen.
Sure. Hey, Laura, I have it queued up as well. Let me give it a try on my end. We might be having the same technical problem. 1 second, let me reload it.
Looks like it might be the J&J server.
Maybe. Okay, give me a moment to get the password.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michal Preminger, and I head Johnson & Johnson Innovation in East North America. I am
Yeah, we could be having a problem with the J&J server, and we may have to move on to the next.
Let me give it a try as well, Julius. I've got it queued up. One more try.
I'm excited to be here today and very grateful to the organizers for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this very important topic. As a leader in one of the world's largest healthcare companies, I am committed, as is Johnson & Johnson, to considering the root causes of health disparities and to advancing health equity. At Johnson & Johnson, we engage deeply in the entire biotech process, from idea to marketed therapy. As the title of my talk suggests, we recognize by living into this process that to achieve health equity, representation of the diverse patient populations that we ultimately serve should be mirrored at every step along this process, including early discovery, clinical development, and market access. Here, I would like to explore the current misalignment, advocate for change, and share with you more about Johnson & Johnson's understanding of its important role in the journey to achieve health equity and some of the ways in which we are acting to promote better outcomes. Before we start this exploration, I'd like to acknowledge and mourn the staggering number of deaths, more than 80,000 each year, that could be prevented if we didn't have such equity gap between white and Black patients, and the many lives of diverse patients lost due to COVID. Also, I'd like to shine light on the need for education. As you can see here, 70% of Black Americans, compared to 41% of white Americans, believe that the healthcare system treats people unfairly based on their race. Today's healthcare challenges have become so complex that we need transformational innovation to meet them. Taking transformational innovation from inception to market approval and to access to patients is a complex undertaking. To successfully accomplish this, an innovation ecosystem needs to be created that includes a series of different stakeholders. Let me introduce them briefly. Research institutions, the origin of much of the innovation leading to new therapies, and the government and state funding agencies who fund their research. Scientific entrepreneurs and healthcare professionals who are interested and committed to solving healthcare problems. Accelerator programs and incubators that provide a home to projects which mature in academic labs, and ideas from non-academic communities that do not have the infrastructure needed to develop them further. Business entrepreneurs who can define the value proposition, put together a development plan, and start assembling a team that can execute to make the project fundable by investors and to raise this funding. The investors who provide capital to startup companies, and of course the startups themselves, which many times serve as the necessary bridge between idea and later stage development. The larger biopharma companies, which can take on the challenging tasks of development, regulatory, scale up, as well as bringing therapies to market and to patients. And supply chain, which we never used to think about until COVID turned us all into toilet paper hunters and supply chain experts. Almost finally, the healthcare providers and systems that bring the therapies to communities and patients. And finally, as we have grown to appreciate, especially during the COVID pandemic, the communities themselves, with their support systems, information channels, and influence structures, impacting people's access to new treatments, as well as their choices of whether to opt in. We believe that in order to get the ultimate outcome of health equity, the voices, health and cultural needs, and ideas of all diverse populations need to be heard and incorporated at every stage of this innovation journey through appropriate representation in all nodes of the innovation grid. As we look across those nodes, here are some data to demonstrate the issues that we face. In the origin, we can see that attrition from STEM studies is greater among Black and Latinx students. Black representation in clinical trials is 2 to 3-fold smaller than their share in the US population. In the case of Latinx communities, challenges are even greater, Only 1% of clinical trial participants are Latinx relative to their group's 18.3% share of the general population. And finally, as we think about minority representation at the level of healthcare providers, at present, the percentage of Black physicians is less than 5%, far from the 13.4% of the US population. Hispanic Latinx physicians make up 5.8% of total physicians in the US, while the US population of this minority group is 18.3%. And finally, in the middle, we see the lack of representation or the disproportionate representation of the Black community within business. I will soon share with you some of the strategies that we deploy at J&J to enrich representation across the innovation grid. But first, a quick introduction. J&J is one of the largest healthcare companies in the world. It operates in 3 business segments: pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and consumer health. I think you know our consumer health business because probably you got your first bath with Johnson's Baby and you got your first knee script to be covered by Band-Aid. But you may also learn more about our pharmaceutical proposition and medical device offering, covering surgery, heart disease, and of course, through pharma, multiple therapeutic areas. Our company employs more than 130,000 people around the globe and sell products in 175 countries. Our annual research and development budget is more than $12 billion. Johnson & Johnson Innovation is our early stage partnering organization designed to enable us to collaborate and co-create at early stages of innovation with multiple inventors, entrepreneurs, and startups. We bring together Johnson & Johnson technical and scientific knowledge alongside the expertise and capabilities of other partners to help guide the development process. We then bring multiple tools to our partners' disposal to help fuel their ideas. This can be in the form of incubation in our JLab sites, equity investment through our venture group JJDC, new company creation, R&D collaborations facilitated by our J&J innovation teams, and other capital efficient ways to accelerate and de-risk technologies and projects and advance them toward later development. When an opportunity is ready to be scaled, acquisition or licensing are available as options to continue advancing the technology and to deliver it to consumers and patients around the globe. We are present across the globe in both established and emerging innovation hubs. And here in East North America, where we have presence through our innovation center in Boston, Cambridge, and JLabs incubators in Toronto, Massachusetts, New York City, Philadelphia, and our newly opened JLabs in Washington, DC, where we collaborate with Children's National Hospital and BARDA, and have put special focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion as a main theme for that site, as you will see later. As you can see, J&J is engaged and immersed in the entire innovation grid. In the remaining time, let me share how we have been deploying across it to promote health equity. First, the framework that we have defined is the race to health equity. Both as a company and as individuals, our formal aspiration is to help eradicate racial and social injustice as a public health threat by eliminating health disparities for people of color. We have defined 3 pillars to our race to health equity strategy. First, starting with home, starting with our own workforce, we have defined that we would cultivate one of the most diverse and inclusive workforces that inspires innovative healthcare solutions around the world and makes the voice of diverse communities be heard through our own process and our own development efforts. We do this by setting clear goals, creating transparency internally and externally about those goals and how we are advancing against them, and deploying extensive education and training agendas to prevent bias across the entire employee experience, from hiring through day-to-day work to career development. Secondly, under our Healthier Communities pillar, we commit to helping to close the racial mortality gap by investing in culturally competent community care models that create healthy outcomes for people of color. As part of this effort, we make diversity an extremely important goal in clinical trial recruitment. And finally, under our Enduring Alliance pillar, we lead and leverage J&J's powerful partnership network to combat racial and social health determinants. J&J Innovation is proud to use its global reach and access to expand the circle of innovation to include representatives from diverse populations, and not least importantly, help accelerate their ideas that are informed by their experience. We also use similar approaches to crowdsource for both better understanding of the root causes of disparity and new solutions to address it. Here are some of the campaigns we have run and currently running to achieve this goal. In 2020, we ran our Diversity in Innovation Quickfire Challenge, offering an opportunity for US-based innovators who are Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, and American Indian or Alaska Native to receive funding and mentorship to advance their science. The Black Innovators in Skin Health Quickfire Challenge, offering an opportunity for US Black innovators working on potential skin and scalp health solutions to receive grant funding and mentorship to advance their science. Currently, in the context of our partnership with the Washington, D.C. district and the opening of our new JLabs incubator in D.C. in collaboration with Children's National and BARDA, we launched the Washington, D.C. Health Innovation Quickfire Challenge, seeking potential science and technology solutions aiming to address racial and socioeconomic disparities that impact health and communities like the District of Columbia. As mentioned earlier, the Decoding Disparity Quickfire Challenge invited US-based innovators to submit data-driven methodologies, tools, or technologies aiming to better detect, understand, or reduce the root causes of health inequities and inform the crucial next steps we need to take toward achieving equity. To directly support diverse innovators, our California Life Science Association Inspire Quickfire Challenge for diverse innovators invites California-based innovators who are Black, Hispanic, Native American, or Pacific Islanders to submit transformative potential healthcare solutions to receive grant funding and mentorship, again, to help advance their science or technology. And last but not least, the Johnson & Johnson Nurses that Innovate Quickfire Challenge, focused on improving access to care, is inviting nurses and nursing students worldwide to submit their nurse-led novel concepts, protocols, treatment approaches, screening tools, and consumer product ideas with the potential to help improve access to care. As part of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, our teams across the US actively participate in a multitude of initiatives to promote STEM education and reach and nurture the experience of BIPOC students, researchers, and entrepreneurs, and put them on track for success, and provide resources for successful minority-led startups as well. We are proud that in our JLabs, 31% of residents are female-led and 30% are led by minorities. We indeed hope that in helping to provide equity for these entrepreneurs, Johnson & Johnson Innovation will help create health equity for patients and consumers. Importantly, recent advancement in technology have enabled remote and continuous monitoring. Many biopharma companies have utilized multiple approaches to maintain the continuity of clinical trials, and bring treatments to patients despite lockdowns and supply chain disruption. J&J is certainly among those. Learnings and infrastructure created during this crisis time will be long-lasting and enable more distributed and democratized access going forward as well. The accelerated penetration of such technologies into broader communities in the context of the COVID pandemic provides hope that BIPOC populations, which traditionally had lesser access to healthcare provider and systems, may be able to leapfrog traditional barriers and achieve better representation in clinical trial and better access to diagnosis and treatment. Finally, another source of hope is that COVID has also taught us that no one can be safe until everyone is safe. All these learnings give me hope that this journey to health equities is within reach. If only we keep at it with genuine intent and full force and energy. With that, let me conclude by thanking you for your attention and for your individual commitment to partner on this important mission to accomplish health equity for all, and to the organizers for inviting me. Thank you.
Okay, and for the audience here, I did want to pass along Michal's apology. She had a personal issue, but the importance of this topic was such that she actually, over the weekend, made that recording. And it's wonderful to see how one of the leading and largest pharma companies on the planet is actually tackling these issues. So I just wanted to relay that and turn it back over to you, Julius.
Thanks, Jake. So we're running a bit ahead of schedule. So we can actually just, Sarah, are you ready and available?
I'm ready and available.
Excellent. So Sarah Kalil is our next speaker. Sarah Kalil from CoreMap. It's a driven partnership company. Sarah's a co-founder, president, and CEO of CoreMap, where she's developing a disruptive technology platform for cardiac electrophysiology mapping of atrial fibrillation. Sarah is a medtech executive with C-suite experience in Boston Microfluidics and advisor to numerous startups in development stage companies, a longtime council member of Dana-Farber and a board director of both for and nonprofits. Her educational background is in law from Seton Hall and engineering. Yes, I love it. We're from University of Vermont. And with that, Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Julius. Great. And so somebody has my presentation, right?
That would be Laura from MetroTech. You got the presentations ready to share?
If not, I can pull it up. I might even have it open. I can share if that's easier.
That's probably faster.
Okay, let's do that. Be born ready, you know? Okay, share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So first, thank you for inviting me. I'm somewhat humbled by the invitation because this is not a topic that I consider myself an expert on. I have enjoyed the research that I've done to prepare myself for speaking about this, but definitely feel somewhat humbled by being in front of you on this topic. So what I want to talk about is what is diversity, equity, and inclusion from my research, why it matters, who should focus on it, and where and how to make a difference. And then finally, at the end, after my research, I came up with a little bit of an alternative conclusion of my own based on what I read. So I'll share that with you as well. Let me see if I can get this. Great. So I'll say that it's all about the people. And I'm a funded CEO. I closed a $10.5 million Series A. I had no idea how hard it would be to get the people right. Recruiting is much more difficult than I ever envisioned. I thought that the really hard part was going to be on the technical side. As Julia said, we're involved in a very complex domain, the recording of electrical signals inside the heart. Finding the people to build this team truly is the most challenging thing that we're doing right now. And so getting the right people on the team, making sure that we're removing bias even from the recruiting process that brings us candidates. So it's going further back in the process than I even expected. And I'll share that I learned a few things from this research that I am applying to my startup. And then constantly monitoring, monitoring for performance, monitoring to how we're listening to voices. And I also learned that diversity actually results in increased innovation and better business performance. So intuitively, I had certain fundamental beliefs, but my research actually backed it up with data. So on the subject, I've always been somewhat taken by Warren Buffett's position. And if you've ever read about the women of Berkshire Hathaway, and this is decades ago, when asked about his success, one of the things that Warren Buffett said is, he said, I'm winning because I'm competing with 100% of the population and my competitors are competing with 50%. I'm going to do better with 100% of the population. And that always struck with me. As Julia said, I have a degree in engineering. I think there were 4 female engineers in my graduating class in 1981. So being a woman in science and technology, I've always been interested in my gender part of it, but looking at it at a much broader sense as we're on the cusp of, as Julia said when he introduced this, you know, this is a time, or I think it may be Jake, this is a time to take the action. So as Warren says, we look for intelligence, integrity, and energy. If you don't have the latter, the first 2 don't matter. So what is DEI? And so diversity, I think a lot of times we can think about minorities and making sure that we have minorities represented in our companies. But to me, it's well more than just gender and race. I'm interested in liberal, I'm interested in conservative, I'm interested in regional variation in the population. I'm interested in ethnicity. I want as many voices around the decision as we can get. And then equity. And something, as was mentioned, I do have a law degree that I got recently, went back in my late 50s to get a law degree. And I didn't really understand affirmative action. I knew it to be a title, and I knew it to mean that we should remove bias from hiring, but I didn't understand the extent to which the affirmative action as a concept was meant to affirm legal framework that says that bias is illegal. But affirmative action assumes that you can't change the rules one day and expect that the next day that everybody's equal. And if you just are making sure you hire this percentage of one minority versus another, you have to understand that after decades of being marginalized, that every population doesn't show up equal. And so making sure you acknowledge the unequal starting places is incredibly important so that inequality can be addressed. And one of the things in my home when I was raised was a very strong belief that if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And so if you're not addressing inequality in your world, wherever it is, you are part of the problem. So understanding what equity actually means, and then inclusion, it's making sure that not only are you hiring, but you're ensuring that voices are heard and making sure that there's a seat at the table. Sorry, there we go. So what is DEI in the workplace? It just wraps up those 3 fundamentals. It relates to how people of different backgrounds, particularly those who have been marginalized, experience the workplace. So it's much more than just the hiring process. Why does it matter? There are many studies. The 2019 BCG study is, I think, one of the largest, and it studied 1,700 companies. And if you look at that third box there, companies with above average diversity scores had 19% higher innovation revenues and 9% points higher in EBIT margins on average. And so it's saying not only is this the socially conscious right thing to do, it pays off in financial performance. So McKinsey created a roadmap to strengthen inclusion. So they first said, make sure that you have a diverse executive management team. Hold that team accountable, and then put analytical tools to make sure that the team that you're holding accountable is actually achieving the result that you want. And prior to my research for this presentation, I had come across some of the work that Mark Benioff has done at salesforce.com. And if you want a good case study, he's sent his team back several times saying he doesn't have enough data to determine how they're doing. And they're one of the most progressive DEI companies there is. And so I think it's incredibly important. It's hard, to apply that to a startup because all your economies are incredibly small, your hires are few. But as you grow a larger company, making sure that the data support your feel-good thought that you're doing well in DEI. And then the last is about a culture. So make sure that throughout your company that you're fostering a sense of DEI, you're supporting groups that give a sense of participation and community within your organization. So the 3 keys of recruiting diverse talent, sourcing, selection, and retention. Many times people will say, my recruiters aren't bringing me any candidates. And I remember having a conversation with a CIO of Goldman Sachs at one point, and him many years ago getting this same story, I'm just not getting female candidates. And him saying, will you go back in the process and show me what you're doing to change it so that it might not be in my tenure? And if you have to go back to kindergarten and make sure that all people are understanding that careers are open to them and they're not just open to white males. And so that stuck with me. And if my recruiters are saying that they can't get me those candidates, my response should be, tell me what you're doing so that changes in the future. So what I concluded from all this, there was an MIT study that I really, something was a takeaway for me. And that is that this idea of social sensitivity. And it's defined as perceiving, understanding, and respecting diverse feelings and voices. And so, whereas I often saw, put more women on your boards, more women in your organization, I don't think that that's necessarily the answer. I think you may have a higher correlation between a gender and this idea of social sensitivity. But this is really what I think you're looking for, is a leader who perceives, number one, understands, number two, and respects having different voices and diverse feelings in the company. So hire leadership that will listen to all team members with respect and build an environment that gives a vast level of diversity a voice at the table. And that concludes my comments today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. So much resonance in there and an awful lot of great information to unpack. At some point, I will personally ask you for your references because you had a few studies you quoted in there that I haven't read yet. So thank you.
Happy to. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Excellent talk. I have been alerted that, we have a little time left, and I failed to introduce myself towards the beginning, so I'll take that opportunity now. My name is Julius Corley. I am from the University of Delaware. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship and Strategic Partnerships for the College of Engineering. I've known Jake for a while now. I'm a part of the Driven Accelerator Hub team, where I lead the activities at the University of Delaware. My background, initially trained as a molecular biologist at NIH. My undergrad was biological sciences, but I quickly transformed myself into a biomedical engineer at Cornell University. And I received a MBA from Case Western Reserve University. I like to consider myself a serial entrepreneur. I've been involved with a couple of different startups, one of which had a great exit. In 2020, the company of Momentum Pharmaceuticals was fully acquired. in that year. So been involved with commercialization and entrepreneurship for a really long time. Now, that is my introduction. I think in the program, you can actually go to see bios from everyone that's involved with this conference. So if that's what you would like to do, please go for it. And let's see if we have the next speaker ready and available. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so please.
I am ready, Julius, if you want me to go now.
Excellent, thanks, Asim. Okay, Asim is currently the Academic Innovation Lead at the National Institutes of Health. He was previously Program Director for National Cancer Institute, SBIR Development Center, Presidential Management Fellow at NIH and FDA. He's also an entrepreneur, having co-founded, I'm gonna butcher this, is Okada?
Okati.
I know what's gonna happen. Inc. in 2011. There he was responsible for developing the map of over 4,000 health facilities in Nepal in collaboration with Ministry of Health Nepal. Asim has a background in genetics, oncology, training at Iowa State University, the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. And with that, I will let you take it away.
Thank you, Julius, and thank you to you and Jake for this kind of invitation in the introduction. By no means I consider myself an entrepreneur. It's really kind of you to consider me an entrepreneur. The organization you mentioned, it was sort of a pet project with a few of my friends. So I grew up in Nepal, and so I have a soft spot in my heart for all things going on there. So a bunch of my high school friends and I created this small company, not for profit, to make some impact there. And as we learned very quickly, unless you have someone fully committed who is willing to be on the ground to do it, it's not easy to really sort of keep it going. So we tried for a little bit and hopefully made some impact. But that passion hasn't gone away. So I'm looking for next way to make an impact. But so enough of that. So what I'll do today is let me share my slides. I mean, you all know what the government can be like. So I'll start with the little caveat that let me switch my thing. Let's see here. Let me stop the share first. Sorry for this. I'm trying to get there.
No problem. We have some time.
Your full screen was up a few seconds ago, Asim.
Okay, maybe I was overthinking. So give me a second. I think I'm almost there. Here I go. So share.
Perfect.
Okay.
I hope that you're writing down your questions because we're going to have a very active Q&A at the end.
I'll restart. So I'm going to talk about the NIH efforts to enrich diversity, equity, and inclusion in biomedical entrepreneurship. So I'll start with the caveat that NIH is a large institution and there are all different parts and different organizations. There are 27 different institutes and centers. So what I'll focus on is mostly the efforts that we have ongoing that are focused more on biomedical entrepreneurship. I'll give you a little background as well about some of the programs that we have that are focused on supporting entrepreneurship and supporting both academic as well as small businesses that are working in biomedical space. And then I'll get into some of the efforts that we have ongoing to enrich DEI efforts. So a lot of you, and probably most of you are aware, you are at the NIH IDEA conference here. NIH supports research and development, and the whole mission of NIH is to turn discovery into health. So with that mission in mind, NIH gives out more than almost $40 billion each year to academic institutions to do research with the intent and goal of understanding living systems and to gain knowledge. But at the end of the day, what we really are interested in and care about is to take this knowledge and discovery that comes from these studies and research that happens at all these universities and research centers around the country and turn it into a healthcare product or solution to help patients. So all we really care about at the end of the day is to help patients to understand diseases better and make sure that we are supporting patients and increasing lifespan of general public.
I see
So
your Zoom window is obscuring part of the screen. If you don't.
oh, sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. And so with that goal in mind to really turn discovery into health, there is a part within NIH where all of this basic research discovery that happens at different research institutions, we do want to turn it into healthcare products like drugs and devices and diagnostics, digital health tools to help patients. So we have a number of different programs here at NIH that is the intent and goal is to support that. So a number of you might know about the SBIR STTR program, or Small Business Innovative Research and a Small Business Technology Transfer Research Program. It's a $1.2 billion program each year where NIH supports small businesses and startups that are working in biomedical space and that are trying to develop these drugs and devices and other healthcare solutions. We also, a number of years ago, started a program to support academics who are interested in technology and product development. And so, they discovered something in their lab and they want to do some of these key critical feasibility studies and to figure out if there is something in their discovery, if there's a product, or if there is a drug that they can develop out of it. So we supported a number of programs. We started a program in 2013 and then added a number of other programs to create a proof of concept network. So this network supports research institutions around the country that support these early stage feasibility projects, but not just with funding, but also providing all the other wraparound support that is needed to eventually take a technology and build it into a product and bring it to patients. So that includes education and research tools and resources to take an idea and move it forward. About 2 years ago, at the NIH Office of Director level, an office was created. That's NIH Seed Office. So seed as a word also means seeding in early stage innovation, but it stands for Small Business Education and Entrepreneurial Development Office. So that's where I am an academic innovation lead, and the office helps coordinate a lot of these efforts to really foster academic innovation as well as small business and entrepreneurship innovation. To take the ideas that the $40 billion of NIH funding helps support and then take them and build it into products so that we are bringing healthcare solutions to patients. So I'll quickly, since I don't have as much time, I won't go into as much detail, but I will quickly share some of the programs and resources that we have in this entrepreneurship and product development space. So I talked about the SPR STTR program. It's a 2-phase program where you can get research and development support to do their feasibility early stage studies with the phase 1 funding. You can also apply then for a higher amount of dollar, up to $2 million typically, to do phase 2 application and funding. There are a number of other programs like phase 2B funding, where if you have a phase 2 award, you can get more follow-on funding. There is a commercialization readiness pilot program where the idea is to support some of these activities that you need to do that are not R&D, but are needed to commercialize the technology. And at the end of the day, we want to take an idea and move it to a point where either these technologies would get FDA approval and connect to the patient, or we then hand it off to the private sector and partner with private sector to take some of these ideas even further, because we're very fully aware that the amount of dollars we get might not be enough to take a technology all the way through. And so there are a suite of services and resources and funding opportunities that we provide, including entrepreneurship training and regulatory and business development and partnering support. We have entrepreneur in residence, regular experts within our office that are there to advise both academics as well as small business innovators as they're developing their product and trying to get to the patients. And I mentioned the NIS proof of concept network. And so this functions sort of pre-SPR-STTR stage where I'll show the map in a little bit, but it covers more than 100 universities in 34 states in Puerto Rico, where we have partnered with a number of institutions, including the Driven Hub that Jake and Julius are part of, that provides support with both small feasibility capital and funding, but also a lot of education, expert feedback, and project management support to take an idea and bring it to a point where either they apply for SPR-STTR, they create a startup, or they raise follow-on funding to then take the idea and eventually bring it to the market to help patients. So this is the map of the NIS Proof of Concept Network. It includes 3 different programs. NIS Center for Accelerated Innovation supports 3 different centers, one in the Massachusetts, Maine, Rhode Island area called Boston Biomedical Innovation Center. There is one in the Cleveland Clinic ecosystem and one that includes all of the University of California medical school system. That particular center has the focus on heart, lung, and blood indications, so NHLBI, and so that's the institute that supports that program. The program was started in 2013 and has gone on to support almost 200 different projects at different these research institutions. And we've been tracking these projects since its inception, and they have made tremendous progress. Including the REACH program and the IDF State Hubs. A number of these programs have gone on to start a number of startups, won a number of SPR-STTR awards, and also have in fact brought a number of products to market and have reached patients as well. The second program that was started in 2015 was the Research Evaluation and Commercialization Hubs, or REACH program. It's a trans-NIS program. In 2015, we funded 3 different hubs, one in Minnesota, one in Kentucky, the Excite Hub, and one in New York, Long Island Biosciences Hub. And then in 2018, we expanded, or 2019 rather, we expanded to include 5 more hubs in Washington, Colorado, one that covers a number of states in the Midwest, Embark Hub, another one in Kentucky, Kinetic. This time includes all of the universities and technical colleges in Kentucky. And the other one is in Rutgers in New Jersey, ROI. In 2018, the National Institute of General Medical Sciences created these 4 regional technology transfer accelerator program hubs that supported 4 different, in partnership with 4 small businesses in collaboration with academics in that region. So in the Southeast region, Accelerator Network was created, Northeast Driven was created, SARP hub in the Central region, and Accent in the Western region. And so what these hubs provide is training and educational tools and entrepreneurship education in the idea states in these regions with the intent of fostering entrepreneurship in this region. And we have seen the impact. The entrepreneurship activities have significantly gone up, and you all have probably seen the effect of these hubs and program in your region with Driven Hub. And so if you include all of these different hubs and centers, that covers more than 100 universities in 34 states and Puerto Rico. So again, this is a small sliver of the biomedical entrepreneurship foresight activities, but it covers most of the biomedical entrepreneurship focused programs and activities we have ongoing at NIH. And so what I'll do next is, I'll briefly touch upon 4 different programs at NIH that are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then I'll focus my talk on the programs that are focused on supporting biomedical entrepreneurship and enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in that space. So the NIH Office of Extramural Research supports a number of programs and funding opportunities to foster diversity in extramural programs. includes, as I said, a number of funding opportunities and resources that are focused on improving diversity in the biomedical space. The NIH Scientific Workforce Diversity Office is another office that is very much focused on increasing diversity and equity and inclusion in biomedical and scientific workforce. They have a number of efforts ongoing. And recently in March of 2021, or this year, the NIH Unite initiative was created, and with the intent and goal of really appreciating and understanding the existing systemic racism in the biomedical space, acknowledging that and coming up with ways to solve it. So there has been a lot of effort with understanding what some of the problems are, talking to stakeholders, getting feedback and comments. And there are some efforts that are already that have already started out of some of the findings. And so there are two common NIH Common Fund initiative and funding opportunities that are out. And more is happening. There are 5 different subcommittees within the Unite initiative where there is a lot of sort of discovery happening now and talking to stakeholders, getting feedback. There were a number of requests for information. And I expect that within the next few months and in the next year, more and more efforts and funding opportunities and other efforts would come out of the initiative as well. So I'll focus on the some of the DEI efforts that are ongoing from our office, as well as within the small business program and the proof of concept network. So one of the goal of the small business program, and it's written in the law that created this SPR-STTR program, is to increase participation by women-owned and socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. So that's within the mandate of the program. That is what the program really cares about and is focused on. And we looked at the number and representation in the SPR-STTR programs from women and under social and economically disadvantaged business. And so approximately 1/3 of the small business applications and awards are from the women or socially economically disadvantaged businesses. And if it sort of compares to what's out there in the biotech sector, looking at the data here, it's not fair comparison. One is 2020 data and the other is 2017, but it's still sort of relevant. About 1/3 of in SPR-STTR program, 1/3 of applications come from those groups, and in R&D and biotechnology, that's kind of what the number is. By no means enough. Definitely there is room to do much more, but we do want to make sure that we are doing enough. And so we are kind of trying to, with this analysis, wanted to look what's going on and are we lagging behind then what's happening there, but how can we lead and do even more, and how can we lead the field so others can take a lesson and try to make an impact. So this was kind of more sort of a learning experience to see what we're doing now and how we can do better. In 2018, we did a survey of women-owned and socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses. Wanted to understand what percentage of that group have considered applying for SPR-STTR, and if they have not, what are some of the reasons that discourage them from applying? So almost 50% of people had never applied. And we asked them, like, what are some of the reasons? And so if you look at some of the ones that popped up, some of them was around they thought there were little chance of success. There was feeling that funding is already earmarked for specific groups. There are concern of fairness of review, concerns with IP. A lot of them were unaware that didn't have enough information, and a number of them also thought they were too early in development. So what we did based on some of these feedbacks, so thought of ways, how can we now try to help address some of these issues and solve some of the problems? So we have taken some steps and we are all constantly trying to improve and take further steps to try to increase that number that I showed earlier of 1/3 and try to increase the participation in the program, but also bring in more people into the program and have more people succeed in getting the award, but then also move forward to bring ideas from ideas to product. So one of the things we did in 2019 in response to some of the data we collected was So one of the concern that was laid out was, there was some concern about fairness of review and bias in review. So, and there were a lot of hesitation from some of the groups to report on their women-owned and socially economically disadvantaged business information. So instead of asking that information in the application form, we started collecting that information from the System for Management, Award Management, or SAM. That's a system that is managed at the federal government level. So we don't ask for that information, so a lot of people don't feel like they're going to be disadvantaged, or peer reviewers will see that and it will impact or hurt them. So business status is no longer visible to peer reviewers. So it's again the idea with the hope that minimizing potential for bias during peer review. It also reduces some of the applicant burden because the information is already incorporated and collected with the SAM. So we are just trying to improve data quality and consistency and minimize the potential for bias during the review. So that since started in 2019, and I think it has worked pretty well in terms of really getting the information we need. We still are able to do it without adding burden on the applicants. So one of the other concern that was raised was not understanding how the process works, especially for the first-time applicants, and also just that it's just a complicated process. There's a lot of information and a lot of requirement in terms of applying for a SPR program, and there were a lot of stigma, but also inability for a number of these groups to do it. So we created the NIH Applicant Assistance Program. It's a free application preparation program. The goal is to try to encourage the participation from women-owned and socially and disadvantaged small businesses. So what the program provides is a mentor for applicants that have good technology, but no prior NIH experience in preparing this application. It's a 10-week-long program where someone will work very closely with the company to provide support if they're preparing the application. They will, their aim spreads are reviewed and they get advice. They also get advice during the submission process, and they get coaching. And so this program has been going on for a couple of years now, and we have supported a number of first-time applicants, especially from women-owned and socially and economically disadvantaged groups with this program. Another program that we started a number of years ago is the NIH SPR Diversity Supplement. Again, the goal is to promote diversity in research and development in small businesses in the biomedical entrepreneurship space. So any small business that have received NIH SPR award is eligible to apply for a supplement funding to increase the diversity in the workforce. So they can get the supplement money to recruit and support individuals from underrepresented groups in health-related research. We have made 37 awards to date. It can be anywhere, depending on the candidate career level, up to $100,000. It's a rolling deadline. Anyone who has active SPR can apply for it, and it can be for any career level, from undergrad all the way to someone who is a faculty who has just started. Again, we really want to improve the diversity in this workforce. So the program is intended for that. There are a few challenges with it. Some small businesses find it difficult to find appropriate candidate. There are a few other sort of nuances and challenges associated, and we're constantly thinking of ways to improve it and working towards that. The National Institute on Aging recently came up with a number of funding opportunities that are focused on entrepreneurship development. They call it Research and Entrepreneurial Development Immersion Ready program. The goal is training and career development awards to foster entrepreneurship. It's not specifically only limited to women or underrepresented population, but they are highly encouraging it, and they are reaching out and really trying to make a point to make sure that they are getting participation from these groups in these programs. There's three different kinds of programs. One is for academics who are postdoc. You can receive a KO1 award, Mentor Entrepreneur Career Development Award. And so what the funding provides is support to carry on the research, but also a lot of training and education piece associated with entrepreneurship. There is an Entrepreneurship Enhancement Award. It's an R25. where institute can develop courses and training materials focused on entrepreneurship. And then the last two are small business transition awards. So this particular program supports anyone who, let's say, has an idea in their lab. They start a company around it, and they want to get money to take the idea forward. So they can apply for SPR to take the idea. It could be a phase 1 application. It could be a fast track as well. The other thing that we really have been trying to do is a lot of times, especially for women and underrepresented groups, it really helps to see others that have succeeded in receiving an NIH award, but also succeeded in taking an idea forward. So we have a page that is dedicated to success stories from small business programs, as well as NIH Proof of Concept Network. And we're constantly adding stories. And so we have 20 stories and counting, where we highlight stories from either academics or small businesses that either have women founders or minority-owned businesses. And so our goal and intent is to really showcase some of these exciting technologies that came from these groups, so others can see and sort of learn that NIH is supporting these kind of stories, and also see that as something that they can do themselves as well. So we are constantly adding stories, and if any of you know of any NIH funded technologies or SPR funded technologies that fit in this category, let us know, and we'd love to write success stories around it. In 2020, there was a working group that was created that is focused on entrepreneurial workforce diversity, and the group has been meeting almost on a monthly basis to develop strategies and to increase participation, again, from women and underrepresented groups in the product development ecosystem, both academic and small businesses. We had a HSS Small Business Program Conference that is solely focused on diverse perspectives, seeding impactful innovation. So very heavily focused on trying to bring in first-time applicants, as well as applicants from this underrepresented community. The working group is working on two sort of major projects right now. One is around improving and modifying the supplement program and coming up with a way to make it even better. One of the problems I mentioned was around that for small businesses to find candidates from underrepresented groups. So thinking of ways to improve it. And so there is going to be a supplement that I think the current supplement is expiring. So they're working on coming up with a new one, and also working on figuring out a way to optimize the sort of innovator experience for women and underrepresented group, and how do we support the first-time applicants who are in that space apply to NIH programs and succeed. So that's the two projects, but the working group is looking into other areas as well, and constantly thinking of ways how we can support the DEI efforts within the biomedical entrepreneurship space. And then another working group that is within the NIH Proof of Concept Network. Again, this is something that, and I'm glad Julius is on the panel as well, and he can talk about it much more than I can. He is, in fact, one of the co-chairs of the working group. And so this is, started as something that the network wanted to do, and again, understanding the need and how they can all come together and think of ways to increase EDI within the proof of concept network, but not just within the POCN, but in general, being a leader in the academic and early stage product development space, and how that could be supported. So the working group was created not long ago, a few months ago, and there's representation from all of these hubs and centers that are listed here, and they've been meeting on a regular basis. And as you know, at the most recent meeting, they in fact came up with 4 priority projects that the group is going to focus on. And so it's very exciting to see that the network was leading the effort. I mean, we at NIH are just providing support, but it's been mostly the network-led effort, and great to see the progress that the group has made in relatively small time. So with that, would love to hear from you. There's our website information and Twitter and LinkedIn, and so we'd love to connect. We understand that there is opportunity to really improve the diversity, equity, and inclusion within the NIH biomedical entrepreneurship ecosystem. We have made some efforts, and we're constantly trying to improve on that. But we understand that there is a need. I mean, that 1/3 number that I showed, we want to make sure and increase it. And so we're supporting more entrepreneurs at all stages of their career, from high school students to undergrads to grad students and postdocs, and when they created small business. So we have and again, I only covered a small subset of what's going on within NIS. There is a lot more that's happening. So please reach out, and we'd love to talk to you and hear from you as to how we could improve on some of the programs, but also opportunity for you to learn about everything we are doing, and would love to hear from you all. So thank you again for this opportunity to share some of the efforts that we have ongoing, and happy to take any questions when we get to that point.
Asim, thanks very much for that presentation, and thanks for plugging PACE. I wish this was about me, but it's not, so I can't really go much into PACE. But as Asim mentioned, a working group for the Proof of Concept Network, and hopefully we're going to have some very exciting news to share with the community at large in the coming months. But we're working hard behind the scenes right now. And again, thank you, Asim. And Mark, are you ready and available?
I am. I think hopefully everybody can see this.
1 second.
Sorry.
Mark is the Vice President for Technology Opportunity Ventures at NYU, where he and his team promote commercial development of innovations developed at NYU Langone Health, NYU, and NYU Tandon School of Engineering, and facilitate research collaborations within industry. He also advises Ferocity Capital and is the immediate past chair of AUTM. Mark previously served as Provost for Innovation and New Ventures at University of New Hampshire, where he also served as the founding director of the Peter T. Paul Center for Entrepreneurship. Before University of New Hampshire, Mark was the Chief Operating Officer for Qualys and Associate Director for Life Sciences at UNC Chapel Hill's Technology Transfer Office. Mark began his career as a research chemist at National Starch and Chemical Company. Mark is trained in science at NIH and got his MBA from UNC Chapel Hill. And with that, Mark.
Thank you, and I'm glad, thanks for letting me join a little late. I am actually at the autumn board meeting as we speak, talking about all things tech transfer, but also equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm gonna start by just mentioning a little bit of the obvious. So I just moved to NYU about 5 weeks ago, so the programming that I'm gonna describe was done in the last 5 years where I was at the University of New Hampshire. So a lot of the things you'll see that we did that were published will mention UNH, and I just wanted to sort of acknowledge why it doesn't look the same. I'll also mention that this is, I intentionally made the presentation itself brief. So I'm gonna talk through some of the changes and challenges that we had on that. But if anybody after this wants to follow up and talk a little more about how we did what we did, I'm happy to do it, because I do think the model that we've stumbled on, and like I think anything that is successful, you have a good plan and then you accidentally find things that work much better. Let me move my screen here. There we go. It's a little bit of serendipity and a little bit of reasonable planning. So I'm happy you follow up with me directly. I'm happy to work with that. So the idea here was pretty straightforward. There was a supplemental program from I-Corps itself that was made available in 2017, and it was a competitive proposal, and they asked for ways to improve diversity and inclusion in the commercialization of science. So Susan Baxter, who ran at the time the I-Corps site at San Diego State, jumped in and said she had this idea and wanted to use bio as the playground for the work that we did. So I thought her idea was superb. I was at the National Innovation Network where I heard her present on the idea, and I basically begged her to let me participate. As someone who operated a small business, I thought I could be helpful, and then obviously I have good amount of experience in commercialization of science. And the idea was simple: is if we invite a cohort of folks from equity-seeking populations to the bioannual meeting, and we expose them through the lean launch process, through what is effectively an accelerated I-Corps, and we get them to do customer discovery on the trade show floor, that we could create a pretty intense learning environment that people would really respond to. So the first year we had about 30 people join. It was very small, lots of mentors, and we started to sort of play around with it. So, and what I'll say is, from the very beginning, the program worked a little bit better than we expected, because you really don't know what you're going to get out of a program like this and whether you've guessed right. So there were partners, I'll throw the partners up in the next slide, but there were people with experience in venture capital, on the corporate side, all across the commercialization disciplines, and the sole goal was just an experience. One of the ways that we differed from a traditional I-Corps was we made it into a hackathon. So instead of saying, bring your idea and we'll work on your idea, we actually said, we're going to give you an idea to play with over the course of the session. So the first year it was antimicrobial resistance. The second year it was gene and cell therapy. The third year, I think, was back to antimicrobial resistance. And then last year we did COVID, of course. So we gave big topic areas and asked the cohort themselves to find their own solutions. So what we did in the program was, in day one, we really just laid out the tools of customer discovery, the tools of how to engage in how to have the scientists engage in the problem and not the solution. And those of you who do I-Corps a lot know that that's basically where you spend all your time, is trying to make sure people are focused on the problem and not solution. And I will say that's the place where, even in year 5 that we just completed, that hackathon model really works, is because you're taking someone out of the thing that they know and love, and you're putting them into a little bit of a false construct. You're saying, pick an idea, work with a team, gather together around an important problem. Since they don't have a solution, they're less interested in really driving the square peg in the round hole and saying, but this is my science and this is what I want to work on. So we were able to focus them in, and actually found in many ways it accelerated the learning because they were completely untethered from their science. The cohort that we put together was across a lot of different areas. So we had undergraduates, graduate students, early career faculty members, all in the same cohort, which I know mirrors some folks' I-Corps experiences in your own campuses. But we intentionally wanted to have diversity of all kinds. We wanted to have geographic diversity. We wanted to have ethnic diversity, representation diversity, anything that we didn't want two people to be similar in many ways other than they were, early career scientists. So for the first 3 years, we did this all in person. We would have everybody come the day before bio starts. So we had them in on a Sunday, we gave them the training. On Monday, we brought in some mentors and some education, and then we would send them off to do customer discovery on the trade show floor. And I will tell you, the results of this were kind of astonishing. I think there are some other I-Corps groups that are now trying to tack on to session organizations like bio, meetings like bio, where there's a lot of scientists. When we started the program, we thought, well, across 24 hours, effectively, we sort of set them loose on Monday at noon, and then we started wrapping up around 1 o'clock on Tuesday. And the teaching instructor said, well, if they do 6 to 8 interviews, that would be great. And these are people who've never met each other before. They don't even know the problem. The average number of interviews that our teams were doing was in the high 20s in 24 hours. So they just dove in. The mentors, I think the first year we were at the New Hampshire Pavilion at Bio, and we just had a couple of people there and said, we're your safe zone. When you're freaking out and things aren't working, you can come back, you get a little support. my friend Keith McGregor, who was one of the original I-Corps instructors at Georgia Tech, always talks about the safety net. So you could do all this training and send people out, but where is the safety net behind to have people feel like when they're not sure they're going forward, what are you supporting? So we kind of built this safety net out, and they just took to it like you wouldn't believe. And so now there's a challenge in every cohort of who can break the new record for the number of interviews that you can do in a 24-hour period. We had one team do 36. And they were real interviews. Like, we make them give us the notes, we have them give us all the information, and they're real legitimate interviews. So the first kind of part I wanted to throw out for everybody is you can do one of these programs in a very short period of time and actually see results that were very unexpected. Now, then we come into COVID land. So last year and this year, which we just closed, we went to a virtual setting, and surprisingly worked almost as well. So we converted to the virtual setting, but we extended it over a 2-week period because 6-hour Zoom calls are painful. So we decided to break it into smaller pieces, have the teams we spend a little more time in the virtual setting on building the teams themselves, not in terms of pairing people up, but getting to know you, more icebreakers, having people go. I will say we suffered in the last 2 years with the same issue that I think most people suffer, which is in the engagement piece, you just can't, somebody can be doing other things, people turn their cameras off. We did have that problem. In this last year, so we partnered, actually, let me throw up the program partners here. So UNCF, formerly the United Negro College Fund, and the E.E.Just Institute were really important partners. Both of them, obviously UNCF is a major player in the getting underrepresented populations and the commercialization of science. E.E.Just is kind of a spinoff of UNCF. And through the work with them, we actually partnered with the Morehouse School of Medicine this year and did something fundamentally different. We thought, well, if we're doing this virtually, then there's really not a limit to the number of people that we could pull together. So what we decided to do was we partnered with Morehouse and entered into their opening of their master's program. So it's a basics of biotechnology, the business of biotechnology. And so we enrolled 100 students in this program. So they were all undergrads who want to get into this biotech program at Morehouse from all around the country. And this program became part of their hurdles to get in. So we went from 30, 40, this year we did 100. And again, we're really surprised at how well it worked at scale. So that was what, for the teaching team, we were really surprised at how far-reaching of an effect we could have even in a virtual environment. So as we go forward, we're actually thinking of splitting this program in two and having a virtual cohort that might be nationwide, and then having an in-person cohort that might be more focused on near-term solutions, because we saw some of the same changes we saw over a short period of time in the master's students, the undergraduate students going to the master's program, as we did with early career faculty and science. So and then the last piece of the program that we felt was important was to have exposure to what I and others call the triple helix: business, government, and academia. That you needed folks who kind of looked like the cohort to be involved there. That was, it was a challenge for us, but one that we continued to kind of hammer away on. And again, in partnership with UNCF and Morehouse, we had some really excellent mentors and people who participated with us. And that, in the end, and I'll close with something that is kind of the most meaningful thing anybody ever said to us in this process. It turns out to be, not surprisingly, a really key piece of this as well. So again, the program partners, San Diego State University, which is the lead in their idea. And again, I can't give enough credit to Susan Baxter and Stan Malloy, who were the idea folks. I just grabbed on as tightly as I could because I really thought the program could be meaningful and I wanted to participate. Roman Lubinsky at MIT, who runs their venture mentoring system, which was great because he got us a lot of mentors. Chad Womack at UNCF, Bio began a little bit hands-off with it, I have to admit. They said, okay, yeah, fine, do this on the side. And by year 3, they were very engaged in the entire program, because we were elevating people in their early careers to the totality of the possibilities of the life sciences. And so Dr. Michal McMurray-Heath, who's the CEO of Bio, came last year and this year to give the kickoff conversation to the cohort to talk about how important it was. And we're actually having a conversation with Bio about whether they would be willing to take this on as a pillar of some of the work that Bio does in EDI, because we actually think this can scale around, back when we get back to doing more in-person things, we think it could scale in every Bio event. We could also take it internationally, because the same challenges exist overseas, and Bio seems to have some interest in doing that. Genentech provided great financial support, and then in the life sciences industry, Genentech's very at the tip of the spear of issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I wanted to just share some results. And that's it. I mean, the program is simple. I'm sure I'm not going to take up my 30 minutes because we did what everybody else does. We tried something, we iterated, we added new technologies. What we did find, if you're thinking about something like this and engaging in something like this on your own, was that subject matter expertise was really important. We did better and got more interesting results when the teaching team had some direct experience, so we could speak to the specifics of a particular challenge and a problem. So when we did something with gene therapy, I had a lot of experience licensing gene therapy early in my career, and we got experts with that. So the subject matter expertise is really important, but that shouldn't be a surprise. So we published a paper in Nature Biotechnology late last year. And the results are pretty great. So as of this cohort, we've trained about 250 people. I talked about Morehouse. There is a link. If you get the slides, you can see the whole paper. But on the right side here is really what kind of blew us away. So, I mean, you can read it as well as I can, but 85% of people said it exceeded their expectations, which is pretty great for a workshop. It improved their professional network. Everybody thought that this working in an environment with the trade show floor, where you had all these intense people there, subject matter expertise was a great way to learn. The one that I loved was this next one, that 84% said it changed the way they approached the research. And that in the end, that's, I think, what we all want to do, is can we take a cohort from an equity-seeking population, expose them to the totality of science and all the different places that you can deal with your scientific background, and make a deflection, and not necessarily direct them in any particular way. Obviously, selfishly, I'd love more folks going into tech transfer, but that's just me. But wherever it is, going into a different direction. And that was one of the key pieces of feedback that we heard over and over again, was even early career faculty members said that they were reflecting on the way that they did science and wanted to adjust the way that they did their research to take into account the commercialization of science, which again, it's not, I'm as big a defender of blue sky research as the next person, but I think to have a scientist say, okay, I can ask different questions early on. I know, just as a little bit of an aside, at UNH, when I was the PI of our I-Core cohort, and one of the metrics we tried to track, which we're going to start asking questions here too, was success in research funding post-cohort. And we actually found that our average participant in our hackathon program like this wound up getting a 5-fold increase in their success rate of grants, because we were teaching them the commercialization. Effectively, if you've written grants, and I'm sure we all have, it's the broader impacts. And effectively, you're teaching people the broader impacts. And we saw the success rate of the scientists' science itself go up as well. And now take that, layer it on to an equity-seeking population, and you start to create a cohort of people who can be better at getting grants, improving science, getting more resources in. This is one of the reasons that we wanted to partner with Morehouse, was Now we've just lit up 100 of their students on these topics who will go into their master's and their PhD programs thinking about other ways that other types of end results of science. And that was why they jumped on with us, was it was a great way to take such a dense, concentrated group of people and see what the results are going to be 2, 3, 4 years out. And then the last piece of data here, and the paper has a lot more, and it is mostly generally available. And if you can't get a copy, I'll email you one. Is that almost 2/3 continued to investigate entrepreneurship on their home campuses after they left, and so it has had a lasting effect. And we just finished the 5th year, and it usually takes about 2 years. And then we start getting people coming back and telling us, oh, I'm here now. I say we, right? It's our program, but we've sent people into venture capital who never knew what venture capital was or how it worked when it came in. A few, thankfully, went into technology transfer. A couple of them actually wrote successful SBIRs with the team that we randomly put them together with in the program. And so what we are seeing, some of the outputs that we hoped for, was not just, okay, here's an experiential learning environment over 3 days, but did it change the trajectory of your career? Did you look to do different things or just increase exposure? And we're seeing the results of that now, and we're getting some really interesting anecdotal feedback, some good stories of people who said, actually help me get into a PhD program because I could talk directly about what I wanted to do. And we're now working with the UNH Survey Center, which is nationally recognized for their approach. And we're going backwards and redoing all of our surveys so that we could ask more specific questions, with the purpose of this program going forward being to publish papers on and have real actionable data beyond the work that we did here, but to have a professional survey person create a survey for us that we could then look forward with. So the results are great. It is easily the most satisfying thing that I've been involved with in 25 years. This program changed my personal trajectory. I know this isn't about me, but from the experience in here, I went back into Autumn and really tried to help push EDI within Autumn, and that has fundamentally changed that organization. So it's been great for the participants, but I think it's also been great for people who are participating in the commercialization of science. So it's made a really significant impact on a lot of people, myself included. And we talked about some of this already. The post-program support is really important. So we spend a lot of time when people are done continuing to field calls, continuing to provide mentorship. But I guess if I want to leave you with something, it's a little easier to do this than you might think. I've had conversations about the work that we've done here with people say, oh, well, I don't have the time. And I honestly think the teaching team put this together in about 15 hours of thought. But here is the model, and I will share this with anybody that wants to know. If there are small regional meetings or small cohorts that you want to drive, you don't have to try to get 100 people, but the results of what we put together are pretty significant, and I think it'll work everywhere. And we keep trying to engage people like the American Chemical Society, these other large organizations, to say, hey, spin your own one up, and let's try to get this. Let's get 400, 500, 1,000 people involved in these kinds of programs across the course of a year. And just this last couple of months, as a result of this program, I'm working with Chad Womack and the UNCF and EE Just to consider building out a certificate program over the summer where we would provide some of this education. We'd have, Autumn provide IP information, get some commercialization experts in, do like a 6 to 8 week course, grant a certificate, and then have even broader number of people participate who can then take that certificate and use it to either help get better jobs or to engage in commercialization on their home campuses. So I'm going to leave with this quote, which is better than leaving and saying, do you have questions? Because everyone has questions. And this came from a person who is an early career faculty member. And she she got up at the end of the meeting. I'll let you read the quote. But she got up at the end of the meeting and was a little bit shaky. She was very emotional and said that she spent the 3 days really questioning how she viewed her role. So she was an academic and she thought, this is academia, the commercialization is challenging. Nobody in her, she was from an HBCU, nobody had ever really asked her those questions before. And over the course of 3 days, kind of realized that there was a bigger story to play, and that she actually said this, I didn't say this, is that she was doing a little bit of a disservice to the students that came through by not exposing them to the concepts and principles of commercialization. So in addition, I think, to a little bit of changing hearts and minds, which is great, it's really just with the right cohort and with the right participants, it has a knock-on effect that we're seeing. So when we can engage faculty and graduate students and postdocs, especially in the HBCUs and MSIs, and this program, by the way, is 100% HBCUs and MSIs and underrepresented populations, right? So everything I'm talking about really is in that community, is we're starting to see those echoes go into those institutions and have these programs kind of, people are saying, well, I think I could do something like this on my own campus too. So it just was it was a very moving experience. She spent about 5 minutes talking about this. I wrote this down and the teaching team was all like near tears by the end of it, because it was very moving. And we have stories like this, every time we run the program. So thought that would be a great place to end. I know we're going to end a little early, but there may be plenty of questions, and I'll throw it back to Jake and Julius.
Mark, thanks for an excellent presentation. And I'm already overspent in terms of my time. So I'll just say this. I typically don't do this on recorded channels, but I'm happy to lend my time to that program. Working with a lot of HBCUs and minority serving institutions. And I am, I guess, somewhat of a subject matter expert, I guess. So please.
You're hired.
That was the easiest job I ever applied for there. All right, well, let's thank all of our panelists. This has been great. And now we're going to enter into the question phase of the panel discussion. So if all the panelists could come on camera and unmute and be prepared to answer questions. And we already have a question in the chat. I will get to that. But before we get into my questions and the audience questions, I'm interested to hear what you heard, panelists. Does anyone have a question for one of your fellow panelists? Something you may want to have more information about, more clarity? What stimulated you? Please share anything that grabbed you. And this is to the panelists.
May I also answer, Julius?
Of course, Jake.
All right. So, I mean, there was so much that resonated, but one of the things that really struck me was Mark's comment that, look, this isn't that hard, right? If your heart's in the right place and you've got all these people who want to support you, taking action and going from passive to active doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to appear on day one with a giant dissertation and show everyone what expertise you have. You have to put together something that has a high likelihood of being positively impactful, and then just do it. And so that change, because many of us with scientific backgrounds feel we don't get a voice until we're experts, right? You got that terminal degree and now you can say something about one little subject area. I think we instead have to take the science hats off, put the entrepreneur hats on and say, you know what, I know 80% of it, now it's time to go. And so when Mark described his experience and then the incredible outcomes from that program, that really resonated with me. So thank you, Mark.
Excellent feedback, Jake.
I want to do another comment, again, not really a question, but a shout out to the ICOR program. I mean, I was, I think this was Bio 2 years ago. I happened to talk to some of these young entrepreneurs that were part of the ICOR program at Bio. And I was just immensely impressed with sort of, the energy that they brought and also the structure of the program. I mean, I could see the excitement in their eyes and like sort of, the excitement being at that Bio floor, going around and talking to all these people. And I think like that's just is a tremendous program and really encourages these potential entrepreneurs at that really early stage to, and also like, gives them the opportunity to go and see and like talk to people and figure out like that, it's sort of feasible and possible. So really kudos to the program. And again, like you could see the impact that the program has had in such small time. And that's something that sort of we really are looking into and care about at the NIH as well. I think if you really want to make a change in sort of this entrepreneurship and really encourage entrepreneurs from all these underrepresented group to make it, we have to start early. So going to the high school students and like college students and instilling it in them, but also providing all the relevant opportunities where it doesn't exist, I think is really critical and important. And NIGMS has a number of programs in that space that you all might be familiar with, but we're also looking into ways like we could potentially expand the programs we are offering to get to that group of potential entrepreneurs that we can encourage.
And Steve, I will double down on that and say I was this year, because this was the first year we went backwards a little bit, I was really surprised at how well it worked in the undergraduate cohort. Now, it's not the same hit rate. And when you have PhDs and postdocs and early career faculty members, they're going to bring a level of sophistication to the room that you're not going to get from or it will be a rare undergrad that can pull that off. But I'd say we probably got 60% of them got it and grabbed onto it, which I would have thought it would have been in the low 20s. And it was about 60% who really just dove in and embraced everything we were trying to do. So yeah, it's just you can do this earlier than you think. And I think for NIH saying how early can we go, the answer is we're probably not there yet. We probably can go a little earlier.
So I'll follow up with that. So I recently got a VentureWorld faculty grant, and we're doing just that, exposing innovation and entrepreneurship to those undergrads and high school students who may or may not know about this area and look at it as, potential for biomedical entrepreneurship training. But I'll reference my personal situation. I went to an HBCU undergrad. I knew nothing about venture capitalists, intellectual property, entrepreneurship, any of that. I had to kind of learn it the hard way. I went through I-Corps, and now one of my companies has gone through I-Corps. And so now it's really directed my career post I-Corps. So I love everything that I'm hearing here. All right, so let's go to our first question from the chat, and this comes from Brett Pellock. At my academic institution, we spend a lot of time and energy talking about DE&I on faculty committees. The meaningful change in the actual student experience in terms of feeling included, especially our underrepresented minority students, has been very slow. Some would argue it hasn't changed. Do you have any insights from your experiences in the business world for how to make this leap to talk meaningful action that actually makes the classroom an inclusive place? And I will let anyone on the panel feel free to take that. Jake.
Sure. So it's a great question, and I'll start from way back, and I always say EDI rather than DEI or something else. And I always say EDI because I think you have to have a philosophy of equity to begin this, and then you do your hiring and you make sure that you've got a diverse group within that philosophical construct. And then how does that diverse group function with the other people? And so chronologically, they need to be inclusive. That's the last piece of the puzzle. And so with that as a sort of framework, there are a few tools that I found to be very effective. They're not complicated. It just requires a bit of intent. And what I've seen most effective is how you run your meetings. And so there are a variety of different types of meetings, a variety of different types of interactions. But if one of the things that I tell my people is that if you sit in a meeting and we don't hear your voice, you did not need to be in that meeting. Just everybody understand it. I expect that if you're in the room, you're going to participate in some way, right? And that gets people from here to, okay, I'm expected to actually engage. Second thing is if there's any sort of exclusive behavior, talking over somebody, eye rolls, the little cues that we all see and pick up on, crush it. And I'll say that it's very rare that I say crush it in front of others, but this is one time when that can be quite effective. And so you can call it out if it's bad and it's obvious and everybody else saw it. If you do not call it out as the leader of that particular group, then you will see more of it. And so that's not one that you can take offline and talk one-on-one with the person afterwards, because everybody just saw what could be interpreted as tacit allowance of that type of behavior. And then the last thing I'll throw out there that I've also found quite effective in, this is really not a problem in my organization. I've got a wonderful group of human beings, but not all of them always like to talk a lot. And so we've developed a devil's advocate role, which is exactly what it sounds like. Somebody's actually given the job in the meeting of being a counterpoint. That's hard, right? It depends on the topic, but it can be quite difficult. But then it's this artificial construct where if you've got somebody who's really quiet, not really engaging that much, this is a way to get them to say, okay, this is what I have to do. I may not even believe what I'm saying, but now I'm engaging. And I guess the last thing I would say is that depending on the types of thinkers that you have, there are some people who are more tip of the toes and other people who like to think and ponder for long periods before saying anything. Give people information beforehand so that they can show up with their thoughts in order and they can do the prep work. Some people love that, other people see it as homework, but by making sure that you as a leader are understanding how all the diverse people in your organization want to or need to engage, that'll give you the maximum chance of actually getting positive engagement.
All right, Jake, thanks. Some very practical tools. And Sarah, I think you had some comments on this.
Sure. So first, I echo Jake's comment that if you observe the behavior and you don't step up, it might as well have come from your mouth, because you have a tacit endorsement by not standing up to it. And for me, I've seen such change in my professional career. When I was in college, I had a professor actually tell me I was taking the spot from a man who needed it. And so, I mean, that was the generational transformation that I've seen. And so I think we just have to step up. We have to continue to pull out voices. And I like Jake's idea that if you're not talking at a meeting, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to ask you to participate. I expect everybody's voice to be heard. And that as the leader of the company, you set the tone and how important that is.
Yeah, and I'll follow up just quickly with Jake in terms of calling the people out at the meeting. One thing the pandemic did for us, some of you probably don't know, I'm also national faculty for NIH Core. And in this virtual environment, we were not able to call out every single person in the meeting who wasn't speaking to elicit their response, because one, we wanted there to be a high level of engagement, but two, we wanted to know that everyone's voice was important for the issues that we were covering. So, all right, any other?
Just quickly, I put a link on the chat here. There is a toolkit that the Scientific Workforce Diversity Office at NIH has created. It's an interactive toolkit where the goal is to sort of, help some of these institutions to advance their faculty diversity and inclusion practices. So it guides you through a lot of evidence-based activities to how do you foster inclusiveness and hiring and all of those aspects. So feel free to use it. It's available for anyone to use. So, feel free to pass it on to your institutions and others. And I haven't used it in the sense like it's built for, but I've looked at it and it has a lot of valuable information there.
Julius, can I tack on one thing at the end? I hate to be the every panelist has to talk on every question, but I do have something specific on this. I think some of it is a leadership thing. So if you're in front of a classroom, you're allowed to, or whatever, you can set the rules and talk about the expectations and then live up to it. So I just went to NYU and we're talking about hiring, and I told everybody there's papers out there that say if you add if you make sure that in your hiring pool there is one person of an underrepresented population at least, you have less than a coin flip of ensuring that you hire a diverse candidate. If you have two, it goes up to 60%. And so I just told them, We will always have at least two people in the pool, and it's not acceptable to not have two people in the pool. And I don't really care how much work you have to do. We're going to wait. And that means you have to do the work. You have to go find it. You have to go make sure you're talking in the right places, but that's the expectation. And I will not greenlight a hire unless you see that you're getting the behavior that you expect from people. And, you know, so one thing I think academia does very poorly is set clear expectations and insist that it actually happens. So there's lots of study and navel gazing, and we have committees and we talked about it. And they're not really as good at saying, do this and I'm going to hold you accountable if you don't do this. And I think that's true in the classroom, and it's true in leadership too, is you just have to, as the person in front, it's your job to make sure you're picking people out and you're getting those diverse voices, and you're looking over the people that want to talk, and you're pulling out conversations from other people so they eventually know that you want to hear from their voice, or you want to hear their voice. And then I think the second piece is you have to create the space for it to happen. So I think in a lot of academia, there's this fear of making something specific, like you're trying to create a specific outcome instead of everything being for everybody. And I do think it's really important to make a specific program and a specific outreach to each community that you're trying to serve. So in tech transfer, we talk a lot, like we have specific programming for female inventors. We're going to create specific program for, you know, other underrepresented populations. And we're creating a conversation that literally starts with, we specifically want to hear from you and what you have to say on this particular issue. One of the specific problems, and we want to hear it. And that specific invite to make space for a particular conversation, I think, is crucial in order to get the feedback that you want.
Excellent, Mark. So let me follow up on that particular question. You have the unique experience of having been in academic environments over your career. And fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know that you've had to be involved with tenured faculty, but not your direct reports, so on and so forth. And so for some of our academicians, how can they traverse this in the academic, on the faculty side, particularly?
Yeah, I mean, I do think in the end, it comes down to leadership. Like hiring practices in academia doesn't always have to be what the CV looks like. I mean, you can lay a rule on top of it to say just what I did, which I learned from the CEO of TaskRabbit, by the way, rolled that out. But I do think that there has to be a lot more intentionality. And I'll say it this way. Since joining NYU, I've had conversations with a bunch of venture capitalists, which is really nice, by the way. And we talked about this programming, and I said, like, this is important to me. This is what we're going to do. And the response was, yeah, you know, I just don't know where to get people like that. It's really important to us too, but we just don't know where to go. And my response was, then you build it. Then you create programming that will create the people that you want to have in the room, if you can't do it another way. And I think in academia, especially in the hiring side, we let go of that hook too much, and we just don't want to hold ourselves accountable, because it's the same thing. They want that position filled, they have a need, and the need to fill the position becomes more important than the overarching goal of inclusion, because in the end, it's a burden to the individual employee. But I'm a little bit of a heretic in academia. I apologize in advance, but I think if you want to do it, you can do it. And when you don't do it, you just you're telling everyone it's acceptable not to. And that's been too long.
Excellent. Thanks for that feedback. And it's a great segue into the next question. Many businesses have stated the talent pool of diverse candidates is small when justifying traditional hiring practices. However, the data suggests that these biases may be impacting this, and there are several qualified candidates. For instance, if candidates are not local or in your region, beyond one-time relocation costs, are there any reasons not to actively recruit from regions with a more diverse candidate pool? And I will let anyone from the panel take the lead on that question.
I'll step up because I'm constantly recruiting. It's the most important thing that we're doing. While we would like to have a local candidate, if the pool is not there locally, we have to look at regions where diverse candidates may present themselves in greater numbers. It's somewhat disruptive for particularly an entrepreneur, because now you're going to look at how do I support them through relocation. You don't necessarily have a built out HR function. So there are challenges, but I've said to my recruiters, I want the candidates. And so in whatever fashion you can get them to me, then if it's outside of my area, and I've also said in some cases we'll look at a hybrid model of on-site versus remote to get the right candidates.
I love that, Sarah. I love that. Taking away.
Right. I keep thinking of that Goldman Sachs guy telling his recruiters, if you have to come back and tell me that you're in kindergarten telling these kids that they can do anything they want, then that's fine if that's the best you have, but come back with something.
Excellent, excellent. Any follow-on comments from the panelists?
I guess I'll just say that, this might be more of a problem in an urban area. Let's remember what conference this is, right? This is the IDEA State Conference. And so almost all of the hires are going to be brought in from somewhere else. And so if you can, that's a hassle, I guess, but when looked at through the EDI lens, it's freeing. You're going to have to do a reload anyways. And so where do you want to talk? Where do you want to go and tell people about the opportunity? What do you want to insist on in terms of the applicant pool?
Excellent, Jake. I'm brought to mind, I have a collaboration with the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, and often they told me about their problems with actually getting people in the region. And we've often talked about, okay, well, where are you recruiting from? So they've taken proactive measures to now recruit from those locations where they have a high propensity of candidates, but also they pay more to draw more people in. So there are ways to, I won't say skin this cat because people may have cats, but there are to solve this problem.
You know, Julius, it makes me wonder if there's a market for recruiters who specialize in EDI. You know, I haven't gone out and found a recruiter that has that part of their marketing materials, that we bring you diverse candidates, but the whole conversation makes you think that based on the fact that you're going to perform better as a company, it seems like that perhaps it's something in 5 years that we'll see more of. It'd be nice if it was today.
Exactly. And maybe someone on this call, we have several entrepreneurs here, maybe they're going to take it and run with it.
Yeah, right.
I've had a different experience with recruiters, Sarah. I've asked about diverse candidates, for specific positions, and the response is always, yeah, you and everybody else in the universe, everybody's looking for that. And so they are building those capabilities, or in these particular cases that I'm thinking of, they have built those capabilities in, and it's part of their process. Now, could it be done better? Of course.
Or could a recruiter say 50% of my placements in the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months were EDI placements? Or
put it up on the website, and there's so much demand. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Right, because if you say I'm going to be driven by accountability and data, show me your data. How many placements have you made from minorities in whatever role I happen to be looking for?
We're not trying to send people into executive recruiting, but man, it's a way to make a lot of money fast. I'm just putting that out there.
Yeah, right. Next job.
Engineer and me salivates at talking data. So
you and me both, Julius.
So we all know what racism is, even if we don't know the many ways it can be expressed. Fewer know what anti-racism is. Do you think this is a useful concept? If so, how are your organizations seeking to become anti-racist? If not, why not? Jake, I'll come to you first on this one.
Okay. So I'm going to try to take both sides of it here. I think it's an incredibly useful concept. Personally, we all heard the word for the first time at some point. For me, it was about a year and change ago. And it's simple, it's sticky, and it expresses something that is quite powerful. And so for those reasons, it moves from the passivity I was talking about into activity, from the passive to the active. And that to me is where its power is. And I'm sure I don't understand, all the nuance that goes with the word. The other side of the coin is that there's been at least some grumblings and politicization of the word. And I look at that and sort of say, I don't care, right? Every word becomes political in 2021, it seems, and I don't care anymore, right? And so I think the word, the value of it far exceeds any potential for being maybe exclusive or divisive. I think if we understand what we mean by the use of the word, then it's very difficult to say that it's not a valuable concept.
Thanks, Jake. Any other feedback from the panelists?
The thought when you say the anti-racism, it just brings me back to that fundamental lesson that I learned as a child, that if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And so if you're not working against racism in your organization, in your world, in your community, in your family, you're part of the problem.
Thanks, Sarah, for that comment. And I mean, you guys keep queuing me up for the next question, and I love it. Racial tensions have existed since the transatlantic slave trade began. Recent events, from Colin Kaepernick's protest of police brutality to the murder of George Floyd, have brought racism to the forefront. In the past, these kinds of issues were addressed in fits and starts, or addressed in word and not in deed, or simply kicked down the road by our society. The nation has literally cried out for change, and it's not only Black and brown people crying out. What is your organization doing to combat racial inequity? What is your organization doing for people in your organization who want to be a part of the solution? Mark, we haven't heard from you in a while. You mind giving us a shot at that one?
Sure. I think for all of this, it for me always revolves around intentionality. So to specifically ask and not say, I'm thinking this, what do you think? Because when you do that, especially for equity-seeking populations, you hear this a lot, is you're putting the burden of the solution on the people who have the problem. And it's not really about that. It's about saying, first of all, do you see anything that is going on that needs change? And if so, what and how can it happen? So I think I personally walked through a couple of ideas here where we just changed our hiring practice, and that's one of the nice things when you're in the lead is it's okay. I just said it. It's not a university policy, but it's my policy, because I'm going to make that change myself, because I don't want to wait for anybody else to tell me that it's okay, because there's really nothing wrong with doing that. So I also tend to ask a lot of questions about the work environment, and are there things that we could improve on, and what would make people not necessarily more comfortable, because I think that's a sticky question, but it is about inclusion, and are we being inclusive enough in the questions we're asking? And on a personal level, like we ask that all the time. I did that at UNH and I did it here, is are we doing enough? Tell me we're doing enough. How do you feel like we're not doing enough? So it's the carrot is the challenge is always there. So even if we do something good, it's like, oh, great, we fixed a small thing. Are we doing enough? Where can we do something different? And that we just keep asking that question. We're not going to eat the elephant in the whole bite. But if we ask that question every day something will get a little better. And there are an infinite number of days, we all hope. And so, we'll get somewhere over enough time.
Excellent. So Mark, let's dive in it a little bit deeper. So you're leading your organization, and even if the organization doesn't have that policy, what if, let's play this forward a few years, your policy, what you're doing in your office has shown all these great numbers. Do you now try to sell this to the greater organization to adopt it as a policy? I guess the question is, how do we create some real sustainable change?
Yeah, so, all right, fine, I'll answer this. Well, just because there is stuff going on in the background that I'll talk about a little bit. So I think you always have to be trying to do something greater than yourself. So, my organization's fine. They're totally in support of it. And I will admit that oftentimes I feel super uncomfortable because I look like I do, right? I am the white male, and who am I to drive these conversations? At the same time, you just have to accept the fact that, or I have to accept the fact that I have a platform and a position, and you can be the best ally you can be. And I can't, I can sympathize, but I can't empathize with some of the problems, but I can use what I have to offer things. I think it's really important that we have these open discussions and that it's not a zero-sum game. So we're always sharing and things are not proprietary, and that we're always trying to do the next big thing. So I will tell you what the next big thing is, even though it's not really complete yet. This is what I was deciding whether I should ask or not. So in the work from the program that I outlined, Chad Womack and I have become very good friends, and we realize that there's a need for that certificate program. And what we're going to try to do over a very short period of time is get 100 people in equity seeking populations to participate in this program sometime in the next 2 years. And then I'm going to try to create a fellowship program at NYU where we're going to hire 5 to 7 of these folks with these certificates. So that's your entry key. There's no cost to participate. And we're going to hire them as full-time employees. We're going to try to get them an MBA along the way in a terminal program that's 3 years. So they're going to get in, get $70,000, $75,000 a year, get an MBA from a top university, and then we're cutting them loose. We're not hiring. We're telling them you're gone, like go. And when I start that program, which I'm trying to do over the next 2-3 months, I'm going to make a national challenge to the community to say, okay, here's the idea. I dare you all to do this. I'm challenging you to, if it's one person, if it's 5 people, if it's 10 people, it's a scalable program with a scalable solution. And I want to see 2, 3, 4, 500 people from equity seeking communities getting that first step into whether it's tech transfer or venture capital or the law. And we're just going to keep beating away at that until it gets done. So the answer, that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, Julius. There's always something more you can do. So if anybody's interested in that, I will reach out to me separately as I get involved and work out the kinks on my end. I will literally make a national challenge to say, let's get 100 people hired in wherever you are in the commercialization of science, and we'll pull them out of this program.
So Mark, I just got a note from Sarah, and she wanted me to let you know that you are part of the solution.
Yeah, thank you. That means a lot. I try.
All right.
You're doing something.
Any follow-on comments for that question? The question was, what is your organization doing to combat racial inequity? What is your organization doing for people in your organization to become part of the solution? There's a lot there, Tony Brothers. If not, we can move on to the next question. In our democracy, the right to vote is sacred. Recent census data showed that increasing diversity of our nation, and yet fundamental rights are no longer as strong as they once were in many places. This is a clear source of inequity and an old tactic for disenfranchisement. As much as we may wish that we could compartmentalize these issues, we are all members of this dialogue, or we're actively not. As such, what role should organizations play in supporting the basic tenets of our democracy? And I know that's a loaded question, but to anyone who...
I'm happy to bite. I think this was also a change that occurred over the last few years. There was, for a very long time, at least publicly, a very large wall between politics and non-politics. If I want to cast blame, I would cast it on the 24-hour news cycle, but now politics has invaded everything, right? And so hanging on to this idea that your organization is apolitical is easy. It's nicer. It allows you to avoid difficult questions, but I think it's no longer real in the modern world. I don't think it's possible to be a truly apolitical organization. Now, there needs to be limits, there need to be metes and bounds, and I certainly don't have all the answers. But I think when you look across your organization and you can see something that's capital R right, the right to vote. This isn't a This isn't something that we have to debate. This is America, right? And so in that case, I think any either desire from your colleagues to go and do something about it, the desire to vote, basics, people will have the time off, people will go vote, people will be reminded about when the voting goes on, all that sort of thing is easy. But when people want to go to the next level and say, I actively want to fight some of these issues, then what I would suggest, this is what we do. We have a leadership group that we sit down and we think about it. We talk about it and we say, what could go wrong here? And on the balance, is this important enough to go after and to take some action on? And I firmly believe that the right to vote, I'll state it in the positive, is one of those issues.
Thanks, Jake, and I'll follow up with that. My father's family is from Ghana, West Africa, but my mother's family was here. Listening to my grandmother and grandfather fight to be able to vote has always made me vote every time possible, because so many people sweat, blood, and tears in just the ability to express themselves, the ability to seek help from poverty, so on and so forth. I could go on, but anything that disenfranchises any group of people from that right is just wrong, and I'll never support it. Even with my small startup company in Cleveland, we've tried to be on the right side of all these types of issues and a part of the solution. And with that, I will actually go to the next question. And this is the easy question here, I think. I like to ask this question for all the PhD candidates when they're doing their defense. If you had a magic wand that could grant you unlimited resources, whether it's money, human capital, policymakers, or et cetera, what are your most promising solutions for the issues that we face with racial inequity? Unlimited resources. If you could wave a wand and it be done, whether it's people, places, things, programs like Mark is making at NYU. All right, Sarah, you mind taking a gander at this one?
No, I don't mind at all. I think that if I could truly wave a magic wand that didn't have time, reality, any of those impositions on it, it would be that the next generation is raised without bias, and getting at the youth, which is the future, to be raised to be colorblind, to be gender blind, to be accepting of all comers, then to me that is the most promising solution. Because to solve a problem where humans have been raised with bias is the enormity of changing people's thoughts and minds is daunting. I mean, that's what the world is trying to do with the, as you talk about the fits and starts. But if we could raise a generation absent of bias, it's the solution.
I love it. I love it. Jake, any comment?
Sure. It's complicated, right? I mean, you're asking us to fix all the worlds, but you're making us omnipotent. So I love the question. I'm reminded of a lunch I had. I used to work with a gentleman who was born and raised in Afghanistan. Wonderful guy, an engineer by training. I didn't hold that against him. And we went to lunch, and we would often talk about how to save the world. And my issue, very much picking up on Sarah's comments, is education, and specifically not post-secondary education. It's pre-K education. It's early childhood education. And I gave my stats and facts and figures and stories and most compelling argument to this young man. And his response was, this is all well and good, but if you don't have security, you can't be educated. And of course, he grew up in Afghanistan. And the reason that he was able to make his way out is that he was a bright young guy who got very, very lucky and was actually plucked out of his home country at age, I think 13 or 14, and brought to the US and put in a whole new family and put into an American school. And that is not a scalable solution. And so what I've taken from that is that there's Maslow's basic needs have to be fulfilled. And once you do that, then it's about education. And so there's a really big wand that's required to get people so that they have shelter and that they have food and that they have security. And then you got to deal with the educational disparities in this country. And at that point, then I think everything is rolling downhill, but that's a heck of a wave of a wand. So that's how I see the problem.
Thanks, Jake. Mark, any comment, follow up?
I'll be only slightly more didactic than Jake, and I would say, that healthcare is a human right, because from the ability to be healthy and well and have that taken care of, you solve some of the early stage problems of access to care and when people are sick. But the second I might pump $100 billion into the HBCUs and MSIs to make up for the total fundamental lack of funding over the course of a very, very long period of time. And I would, fund them so that they can create the solutions that feel best serve the communities and do it, a 20-year commitment to fund them at a level that would, pop some of those institutions up into the top 50 and top 50 research enterprises or institutions in the US and have them compete on equal footing. Because they just never had the resources and have been fighting with, 2 arms and a leg tied behind their back for a long time.
I love that, Mark. At the University of Delaware, we are engaging with minority serving institutions, and I have admin support, grant support, so on and so forth. I have HBCU colleagues that are competing for the same grants, but that back engine that I have, they don't. And so just a clear, equitable playing field, I think would mean a whole world of difference. So I really like your.
Yep. Many of the HBCUs that have reasonable research funding, reasonable being, over $20 million, actually outperform an average university in terms of the commercialization outputs. But they just don't have as many inputs, so the outputs get lost.
Excellent. And so there are no more questions in the chat. And this is where I'm going to open it up to all the panelists for any final comments or any burning questions that you wanted to answer that I didn't ask. All right, and with that, you've heard much commentary about what Company X or University Y can do to combat racism and racial inequality. I have a PhD in biomedical engineering, as well as an MBA in small business administration and finance. I'm an expert in entrepreneurship and commercialization of deep technology, not EDI. When all of this came to the forefront, I knew that I couldn't be a part of the group that just kicked the can down the road. On top of all of my other duties, I'm now co-leading PACE, an NIH-sponsored working group for the Proof of Concept Network to improve EDI. And I'm also co-chairing this session with my friend and colleague, Jake. We challenge you to determine what is the one thing that you can do to change the status quo. And with that, I will turn it over to Jake for any closing comments he may have.
Well, that's a tough one to follow, Julius. I think this was a panel that greatly exceeded my expectations. We got into some really deep and thorny issues, but you know what? We got into them in such a positive way and such an active way where hopefully the audience can see that it doesn't require an enormous investment. It doesn't require a magic wand. There are lots of things that you can do today, and people on this panel even that are keen to help you, to help all of us with this issue. I'm very, very positive about what the next few years are going to look like in this domain. I know we all have lots more left to learn. But man, it's great to see some momentum and some progress, and to be some very small part of that. And so thank you very much, Julius, for working on this with me, and kudos. It was a fantastic panel. thank you to all the panelists.